Benjamin Haddad is Minister Delegate in the French Foreign Ministry and is a member of the Renaissance Party founded by Emmanuel Macron. So he's a man who knows European politics very well from the inside, and he's in Berlin today. Mr. Haddad, thanks very much for speaking to DW. There have been lots of pessimistic statements about the relationship between France and Germany in recent months. Here's one example from Le Monde. Instability in France has put the Franco-German alliance to the test. Or Politico talking about the faltering European engine. You're close to all this. What is the mood between Paris and Berlin right now?
No, all of this is commentary. The truth is that we see that we're at a turning point for Europe in the geopolitical environment that we know, Russia's war aggression on Ukraine, the United States progressively turning its back on Europe, the trade pressure from China, and we have a responsibility to have a strong European message and voice on the international stage. And for this, France and Germany work together. We work together on the competitiveness agenda on Europe, whether that's the simplification of our rules, the deepening of our single market, the protection of our industry against unfair competition, especially coming from China. We work together on having an ambitious defense agenda for Europe. If you take just, the SAFE program, 150 billion euro loan from the European Commission, to invest in common procurement and common projects to reduce our dependencies and make Europe a real defense actor in its own right, not depending on the United States. We work together on the support for Ukraine, and I'm optimistic that with the election in Hungary, we'll be able to finalize the 90 billion euro loan that Ukrainians need, both for their economic and military needs for the next couple of years. Let's be frank, we don't always agree on everything. It's normal. But the question is not about agreeing on everything. The question is about knowing and sharing this sense of responsibility that we need to continue the dialogue. We need to shape a common and ambitious agenda, both for our bilateral relationship and, of course, for the strengthening of Europe.
Okay, you say there's a lot of cooperation and working together, but some people say there are problems. You don't agree on everything. Some say it's about the joint military project, the FCAS fighter project, which is stalled over disagreements about where this aircraft should be built. Some people say the problem is about Germany being annoyed that France didn't support the big trade deal that the EU has just signed with South American countries. Isn't this a bit more than the old national rivalry? These are really concrete questions of policy.
No, but let's take the two issues that you just mentioned. So the trade deal with Mercosur, let's be frank, this is something that we disagreed upon for the last 25 years. So it's not like it's a new issue. We are in favor of trade deals, of diversifying our trade agenda. But at the same time, let's make sure that we have a level playing field and that we protect our key strategic industry. Let's think about our farmers. We cannot say on the one hand, we will put certain constraints on norms and standards, on pesticide, on how you produce for our European farmers, and then open our market to products that are produced with pesticide that are forbidden in Europe. That's unfair competition. So this is why we've said on Mercosur that we need to take measures to protect the agriculture in Europe, and France was with Italy, with Poland, with other countries actually making that case. Let's have a safeguard clause, let's have mirror measures. So the same kind of reciprocity on norms with our trade partners. This is the same principle that we'll defend on any trade agreements. But we've had other trade agreements. I'm thinking, for example, of the EU trade agreement with India that we've welcomed and supported because it's important to deepen the relationship with these partners across the globe. And when it comes to FCAS, look, I think it's an important project because on the one hand, we cannot say we need a European defense industry, we need to scale, we need to simplify, we need to build synergies. And then when we have concrete projects, we're not able to deliver.
But is it going ahead?
Now, when we say this, it's true that when we're trying to do ambitious things, it's complex. We have, I think, a clear alignment between the governments. The governments want this project to succeed. We have two great companies, very innovative industrial actors, Dassault and Airbus. And it's true that when you're trying to build these projects, you have challenges. So we'll see. As you know, right now there's a mediation that's underway with two mediators, French and German, working with the players, with Airbus and Dassault, and with the governments to find a solution. And I hope that we can move forward, because beyond this specific project, it's really about delivering on a common agenda for a European defense cooperation. Because, look, member states are increasing their defense spending. It's the case of Germany, and this is good news. France has doubled its defense budget over the 2 terms of the Macron presidency. We're also putting resources at the European level. The key now is to avoid fragmentation, redundancies, competition between different projects. If we want to be able to go at scale and not have to rely on the US or on others, it's urgent. We have threats on our borders. We have Ukraine that's still defending itself bravely against Russia. This is why we need also these common projects to be able to project power in the long run.
Well, I mean, you talk about building up military budgets, and both countries are doing that, but Germany is really going ahead quickly. They've got an ambition to have the largest armed forces in Europe. Is there some sort of nervousness, perhaps, in Paris that Germany could soon have a military budget that's double the size of France's?
France has, as I said, it's doubled its defense budget over the 2 last term of the president. We continue this increase. We've actually accelerated this increase in the last budget. And by the way, this was a budget where we lowered spending on many areas, but not on defense. We continue to accelerate the increase on defense, and that's important. The key on all of this is to continue also at the European level. Because if we each go solo at the national level, we'll end up with more fragmentation, with more competition between projects, and we're under-deliver. And that will not be good for the security of Europeans. And this is why on defense, on space also, if we want an ambition and not have to turn to Elon Musk, if we want to launch and be able to have an autonomous access to space, this is why we need common European projects. I'll give you a specific example on space. IRIS². It's this project to have secure telecommunication in orbit and not have to turn to Starlink or other kind of solutions. This is something on which we need to build a common European solution. We need to put budgets at the European level and deliver together, France, Germany, with our partners. So the fact that countries are spending more, the fact that countries are more ambitious is good. Let's just make sure that we keep a European ambition and agenda.
Okay, European ambition. We talked about France and Germany, the so-called engine of the EU, but what about the idea of the EU more generally, and in particular the ambition for European enlargement, the idea of adding even more countries to the European Union where it's already difficult to get agreement? I found a quote from you: enlargement must remain demanding and merit-based. Does that mean that you don't want EU enlargement?
No, not at all. On the contrary. Enlargement is a geopolitical necessity for Europe. I mean, we've seen it with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. We cannot let gray zones within our continent, in our midst, be theaters of interference from predatory power, from Russia, from China, sometimes from the United States. We have the Western Balkans at the heart of Europe. It's closer, actually, to France than Ukraine is. We have Ukraine fighting bravely for its democracy and to get closer to Europe. We have Moldova, which re-elected a pro-European reformist government last year. And so we have to accompany these countries. It's for the stability and security of Europe. It's also for the prosperity and deepening of the single market. Now, with that being said, it is a demanding process, because it's about reforming and making sure that you ensure the rule of law, liberal democracy, the independence of the judiciary, the fight against corruption, the protection of minorities, etc., etc. And we're here to accompany these countries in these paths. You have countries that are moving forward quickly in reforms. I'm thinking of Montenegro, for example, but others as well. France sends experts to these countries.
So France is backing Montenegro's application to join soon?
Yeah, absolutely. Montenegro is a candidate. We support Montenegro. They're moving forward in reforming. We're there to support and accompany Montenegro. I've been to Montenegro several times. The president will be in Montenegro next month. And so we really engage with these countries.
How soon do you think they could, for instance, Montenegro could become a member?
I'll be frank, I'd never like to give a timeline, because it also depends on these countries. It depends on their reform path. It depends on ticking the boxes of the application process. But once again, it's an important project. We work very closely with my colleague and friend Günther Kretschbaum precisely on working. We'll be going together, actually, to both Montenegro and Bosnia-Herzegovina in June, and precisely to continue to work with the candidate countries.
One argument against quick enlargement is that cheap labour from new entrants could threaten jobs in the older EU countries. But some say that that is a semi-populist, semi-xenophobic kind of argument, and it's stoked by far-right parties such as the Rassemblement National, the National Rally in France. Where do you stand on that?
Well, look, I mean, first, when you're in a single market, then you have to implement the same rules. And this is why these reforms are so important, because they allow you to be on the level playing field when it comes to norms and standards, environmental, social protection, etc. But you're completely right that, look, if you look at the previous enlargement, the one from 20 years ago from Central and Eastern Europe, you know, beyond an enlargement, let's be honest, there was also a reunification of the European family, of bringing tens of millions of inhabitants that had been left behind the Iron Curtain, left under Soviet communist rule, and it was a great moment for Europe. When I go to these countries, and once again, as you can see, I'm very demanding on the reforms, but when you have countries that in population that support massively joining the European Union, that are ready to go through demanding paths of process, sometimes risk their lives. Think about the young kids in Maidan in Ukraine in 2014. You think about the protesters in Georgia. That shows also that our European Union is so attractive, that it's still seen as an inspiration, an aspiration for these people. It should give us also more confidence in the European Union. Look at the UK, which left the European Union 10 years ago, and now is trying to get closer and closer to Europe. Look at Iceland, that is applying maybe to join the European Union. So I think, you know, our project, it needs to be reformed, it needs to be deepened, it needs to be transformed to be more prosperous and competitive, to be able to defend itself, to be able to fight against illegal migration. But you can see that our Europe is still a project that tens of millions want to join and aspire to be part of. And that's something that says something about the European Union.
Yeah, there's concern about movement of people within the EU and potentially expanded EU, but also about people arriving from outside the EU. We've got conflict in the Middle East again. Are you concerned that that could lead to significant migration flows such as we saw in 2015?
I think it's very important, if you want to be a political power, to have borders and to be able to protect them. And we at the European level, we created the Schengen zone, the free circulation area of goods and people. That was an amazing progress of Europe, but we didn't do enough work in securing the external borders of Europe and supporting the countries that were the external border and having common rules for migration. This is starting to change. We've adopted the Asylum Pact, which will allow, for example, for a first selection of asylum seekers at the borders of Europe. Now it needs to be implemented. The European Parliament, just a couple of weeks ago, adopted the return regulation, which will give more leeway, more resources to member states to be able to expel illegal migrants that should not stay on European soil. I think that's very important. That should be adopted as well. I think, it's a democratic issue. When you're a country, or you're the European Union, you adopt certain rules for people to come in if they work, if they integrate, if they respect the rules and the laws. But if, for example, you didn't receive asylum, or if you don't respect the rules, then you should not stay on European soil. And that, I think, there's a strong expectation from our population to be very clear, very firm and humane about this. It's an expectation from the German population, expectation from the French population. It's extremely important that we deliver on this, also because it's a way to show that our Europe responds to the preoccupation of our citizens. Otherwise, they will turn to Eurosceptic parties. I think these Eurosceptic, these populists, they don't bring any answer to this. You need cooperation. You need to work together.
The far right have just had a big success in elections in France, haven't they? So maybe they are turning to populists.
Not really a big success, actually, in the last local elections for the far right. I actually missed cities that they were hoping to get. And it shows once again that if we're in the center, the pro-European, the liberals, if we're united, we actually can win. But we have a responsibility on issues like immigration, on issues like growth, to deliver and to give concrete results. And this is why we're working with Germany and others at the European level to adopt rules, to simplify our system on competitiveness, to deepen the single market with the Capital Markets Union, to support our innovators for growth, and to defend our external borders. precisely to show that our European institutions, they deliver concrete results for our citizens.
All right, one big sticking point in the European Union has long been the fact that unanimity, the support of all member states is needed in many areas such as foreign policy. And this really does slow down the decision making, right? Is it time to move to majority voting for the big decisions in Europe?
I think we'll have to have a deeper conversation about the institutions and the decision-making process, the agility. You are right that on certain issues, foreign policy and defense is one, taxation is another one. We have unanimity voting, and we could have a reform. I do think that foreign policy and defense is a specific kind of area because it is an area that's so at the heart of sovereignty of nations that I think the unanimity, the consensus is quite important.
You're worried about being overruled.
But what's very important as well is that we don't have one single country that weaponizes this, that instrumentalizes it for domestic reasons. That was the case of Viktor Orban in Hungary, who had become de facto the spokesperson, the ally of Vladimir Putin, of Donald Trump within the European Council. Now I think we have a new prime minister with whom we'll engage to support Ukraine to finalize the loan, who will defend the interest of Hungary, but who will do it in a sincere and transparent way, not as an ally of the adversaries of Europe. And this is how we have to work together to build consensus and to deliver once again on all this agenda.
Last question. You mentioned Donald Trump. He stirs things up, doesn't he? He likes to say Europeans should do more for themselves. They should do more in NATO. They should take care of Ukraine. They should open the Straits of Hormuz and so on. Is Trump, in a strange way, good for the EU, or is it all negative?
I think, I think he's part of a deeper trend and an accelerator in a way. I mean, you look at even his predecessors were calling on Europeans to increase their defense spending and take more ownership of their security. Barack Obama didn't intervene in Syria with the consequences it had for Europeans. We've seen President Biden take protectionist measures like the Inflation Reduction Act, which had consequences for our economies. I'm not saying it's all the same, but the conclusion we have to draw from this is to do more for ourselves, to focus on our defense, on reducing our dependencies, on being able to act on our own on the world stage. Otherwise, we'll just be a passive bystander, a commentator of great power rivalry between the US, between China and Russia. And we don't want this for Europe. This is what President Macron in France has defended ever since 2017 and the speech on European sovereignty in Sorbonne, is to say we need, in this world that is becoming more turbulent, more violent, we need to be able to act on our own. And it's true that in this respect, what's happening in the US with the Trump administration needs to be one more accelerator of this. But I think it will still be very relevant even beyond this presidency.
Benjamin Haddad, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.